Welcome to South Asian Environment Dialogue. This is a program where we discuss the range of issues on environment and climate change, not only in South Asia, but globally, but with a scan and with a close watch on South Asia. Today, we are going to have our 27th episode. For the last 6 months or all, we have been working on this. And thanks to all of you that without this, we can't have this in the first place. Now, this program is brought on by the Climate Channel Canada in collaboration with the Plurals India media platform and also by the No Bangla, No TV Bangla YouTube channel. So today, I think we are going to discuss something which is not only a South Asian issue, it's a global issue, but definitely impacting South Asia because South Asia is one of the more impacted parts of the world in terms of climate change. Our title today, as we have framed it, US Net Zero Summit, Show Off or Showstopper with a question mark. That question mark is very important. And let me first introduce the panel, a very, very eminent panel. I actually need not introduce them because all of them are known in their own way, but still I have to. I have with me Sanjay Basist, Director, Climate Action Network South Asia. Welcome, Sanjay, to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Jayanta.
I have with me Dr. Salimul Haq, climate scientist, director of International Center for Climate Change and Development, ICAD, and also advisor of the least developed countries and whatnot. Is a very, very prominent figure in the global kind of negotiation part. Welcome, Salimul Haq, to the program.
Thank you very much, Jayanta. I'm very happy to be here.
Great. Absolute pleasure to have you. I have with me Chandra Bhushan. Chandra is one of the foremost environmentalist and climate change expert in the country, in India, president of iForest, a non-profit. Welcome, Chandra. Welcome, CB, to the show, as we call all of us call him CB. So welcome, CB, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
And we have with me Ranga Pallawala. Ranga, we had the privilege of having you in the program earlier as well. National Climate Finance Advisor for Commonwealth Secretariat from Sri Lanka, and really looking forward to have Sri Lanka's point of view from you, Ranga. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Great. So with just a short introduction, all know that Joe Biden, the US president, when he had his campaign, US presidential campaign, in sharp contradiction to Donald Trump, the former president, had put climate change action in kind of central to his campaign process. And true to his words, after assuming office within 100 days, he has called for a global meeting, a leaders summit, as he called it, to push climate action. And now many are saying that it's a summit to push the net zero target. Now that's great, and I think all of us have been welcoming it. But also there is a question that how much is actually real action and how much it is actually a geopolitical ploy. Because we all know that due to Donald Trump, US is kind of out of the main negotiation for 4 years. And now China almost kind of a prominent position, despite being the biggest emitter of the world. So is Biden actually trying to regain the geopolitical dominance in climate negotiation, or it's something else? So we will be discussing all this, but let's start with that point, and let me start with Dr. Salimul Haq. Dr. Haq, what do you think about it? How you qualify this summit?
Well, I am quite willing to give President Biden the benefit of the doubt. Okay. He claims that he wants to become a leader. He has appointed a number of very senior figures, both in his cabinet as well as the climate envoy, the former Secretary of State John Kerry, who negotiated the Paris Agreement on behalf of President Obama at that time. In fact, he sent his climate envoy John Kerry to India and Bangladesh just a few days ago to personally invite your Prime Minister and my Prime Minister to join his leaders summit on the 22nd of April. So I take these all as good signs. I take it as a good sign that he has put in place a $2 trillion infrastructure bill, which has very, very significant amounts of investments in the kind of green jobs and kind of changing the trajectory of greenhouse gas emissions that needs to be done. So I am quite willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, but then actions speak louder than words. So words are good, but we need the actions to follow. If I can say something about the issue of net zero as well, the issue of net zero actually arises from the agreement in the Paris Agreement of keeping the global temperature below 2 degrees, well below 2 degrees, and if possible below 1.5 degrees. And that is really the goal from particularly the vulnerable countries, but all countries have agreed to do that. And we are not headed in that direction. And so the idea of net zero by 2050 or by 2040 or by 2060 is a simple way of telling the world from each country that they are going to take it seriously. They will go to net zero by a timeline, a suitable time within that period. These are not plans. These are more like aspirational pledges. There's a long time between now and 2050, all right? So we should not go too hung up on whether it's 2050 or 2060 or 2040. In fact, what is more important is what is the 2030 goal? Are you going to reduce?
I'll be coming to that. That's a very important point you have already raised.
We'll discuss that later.
I would have come on that because 2050 is too far away for kind of actually looking at the actions. But let's first discuss this geopolitical part. Sanjay, what's your take on that?
Well, I would agree with the benefit of doubt that Salim has already shared. Yes, US is trying
So you're not playing the third umpire role as of now?
No. I'm not in the third umpire.
No third umpire here. Okay, fine.
No third umpire. I think, let's welcome Biden's effort. But then I would also look at, as Salim said, action compared to words, because we have seen in the past, US has not, taking the efforts in the form of leadership. We have seen they have really bring down the climate talks in terms of agreement. They have also not committed their fair share on the table because US can says, and Can's position is that if Joe Biden wants to show leadership, leader is always ahead of followers. In that case, 195% by 2030 needs to be reduced compared to 2005 level by US. Is Joe Biden willing to commit that? I think that would be one action that we can look at. 2 trillion is one action. US is also known to bring in private sector big way. So that's I will certainly share my views about, or my apprehensions about that in the net zero discussion.
Okay. So benefit of doubt as of now, but we'll be kind of probing further on that point. But let's first hear CB's view on that. CB, what's your take on that? Benefit of doubt?
Well, I am, this is not about giving benefit of doubt. I think we have to be realist in climate negotiations. I think for a long time, we have been more ideologues than realists. And that has been a fundamental problem of climate change negotiations. The Deng Xiaoping famous quote that it doesn't matter whether you have a black cat or a white cat till it catches mice, right? I think climate negotiations needs that attitude. And I think that Joe Biden's administration looks like a climate evangelist. Okay, so, and this you can feel in first 3 months in terms of the kind of people who he has put into or the kind of announcement he is doing. So I think, first of all, we need to appreciate what dramatic changes have taken place in the US.
Absolutely.
The 4 years of Donald Trump administration meant that, frankly, nothing happened internationally. You started by saying that China has taken a leadership role. I'm afraid to say no. Okay, 4 years of Donald Trump, during that period, China never held a global meeting on climate change. Okay, or invited global leaders to pledge something on climate change. So unfortunately, the reality of the world is, whether we like it or not like it, US is still a significant leader. Let me say that a preeminent leader on driving international issues. China, despite its economic prowess, hasn't reached that level of getting the entire world behind it to move the agenda. Neither Europe has that.
That's I think, a very, very important and interesting point, is that you are saying that China doesn't have the aura of US to make to go with that.
Yes, and neither Europe has, nor India has. You can see what has happened in the 4 years of US backing out of
you need the US to kind of in the mainstream of
that is the
negotiation.
reality. That is the reality of global climate change agreement, global climate change negotiations. That US is the preeminent player right now.
But do you feel, CV, that US has really played the leadership role? Think about Kyoto or Copenhagen or whatever.
No,
has it played that role?
I think US has played constructive role partly and destructive role partly. Okay, I don't think US, there is only one way to, like anything, things are not black and white. Okay,
sure.
Depending on whether US fundamental problem is its political establishment swings north and south immediately. If you have Republican, it damages everything, and if you have a democratic government, then things moves in different direction. So, but overall, I think the reality of climate change is that there is no one who can bring everyone on the table to take the agenda forward.
That's extremely interesting. I think it's a kind of a rubble rouser. So I'll be coming back to all of you, but before that, to Ranga, just taking this kind of discussion forward in what Salimul Saab, Sanjay, and CB have been talking about, how you qualify this summit? And also, I really would like to, in this geopolitical angle, this the fact that US has only invited leaders of 40 countries and not others in the overall 200 odd or close to 200 UNFCCC members. So there has been a bit of a burn on that. So, and your country is actually not being invited despite being one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. How will you take on that, Ranga?
Yeah, I think before I go to an answer that, I would like to highlight one fact. When President Donald Trump announces that he's going to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, everybody had a kind of a sense that, okay, we are going in the same line of the Kyoto Protocol. But what we have seen is that the momentum of the climate action could not be reverted, even though the US, moved out of the Paris Agreement. So it mentioned even within US, we have seen the subnational government, the private sector, they were keep on pledging that they will stick on the Paris Agreement targets and the Paris Agreement process. So it's a kind of a very positive sign for the entire world, even though US is one of the largest emitters in the global scenario, even they take a step back, still the momentum increases. So I think the Joe Biden summit adds value to the process. I think we need to give credit to that. It's good that US at the national level coming back to the international the climate negotiations. So whether it's as a political motive, whether there's a kind of a hidden agenda, that's fine. It gives a positive momentum to the whole process. So let's look at it in that angle. The other question is about inviting only selected countries to be part. I still believe well there might be a reason. So they have invited mainly the highest the emitting countries plus the leaders of the negotiating bloc. So there is a kind of a logic behind the invitation. But I still take it as a positive stance. Well, we are rallying around people rather than looking at the loophole. Let's look at the positive side. It seems the largest emitters coming together along with the other leaders of the trying to understand how to reach the target of net zero by the mid-century or preferably before that. So I think that's a positive side. Sri Lanka, being a very vulnerable country with a very negligible amount of emissions in the global scenario, I think it could have been nice if Sri Lanka being there. But still, I think it's a positive move for countries like Sri Lanka to see the global leaders are rallying around the net zero targets, and even without a less emission state. So it's a kind of an exemplary move for Sri Lankan leaders, Sri Lankan policymakers, also to make a positive stance. And
any kind of official comment from the Sri Lankan government or any response on that front that they are not being invited? or on the summit itself?
Very recently, our Ministry of Energy came forward with a statement that Sri Lanka is envisioning to be net zero by 2050. So that's a statement. I don't think we have an official statement from the head of the government so far, but I think we are moving towards that side. I'm optimistic.
Okay, great, fascinating. Let's come to Sanimul sir. Just taking this thing forward of selectively kind of inviting people, and though there is a logic, as Ranga was also pointing out, that maybe the G20 countries and also the head of the blocks being called, but to many people it's a contradiction, because when you are asking individual country to talk about their climate action, how can you take one country from a block to talk about all of them? It's virtually difficult. India can't talk about China. India can't talk about the other countries in the basic. So that's one point. And it's on Zoom. It's a virtual one. So I'm sure that if we have in Zoom here can have 100 people, surely Joe Biden could have 200 people. So what's your take on that? Because also people thinking that Joe Biden coming and taking such a welcome position on climate change, on climate action after the Donald Trump era, it would have been a good initiation if he would have called all of them. It could have been more comfortable, cushioned kind of thing. And as CB pointing out, that to take the true leader's position. What's your take on that, Salman sir?
Well, you need to remember that this meeting on the 22nd of April, which is Earth Day, celebrated in the United States of America, not in the rest of the world, but in the United States, they celebrate Earth Day on the 22nd of April. The rest of the world, we do World Environment Day on the 6th of June. It is not the first time the Americans have done this. Okay, so this meeting on Earth Day has a history. It was started by President Bush, where he invited only 20 of the major emitters to a meeting. And it was originally called a major emitters meeting. Then they changed the name to major economies meeting. And the premise was that if you get the 20 biggest emitters around the table and they agree to reduce their emissions, then the job is more or less done. Yeah. The rest of the countries don't matter. As Ranga just said, my emissions in Bangladesh, his emissions in Sri Lanka, they don't count. If we go to zero, it makes no difference. India, China, and the US and the big economies count. Now, what Biden has done, he's added another 20 countries to that big emitters list of 20. In that next layer of 20 countries, they have identified, as Ranga has quite rightly said, some leaders' roles from the vulnerable countries in particular. And Bangladesh has been selected in that capacity. My Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is now currently the leader of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, which is 48 of the most vulnerable countries. Okay, so she has a leadership position there and she's being invited in that capacity. And by the way, the Climate Vulnerable Forum, long ago in COP22 in Marrakesh, had declared an intention to go to 100% renewable by 2050, before any other country in the world. And so, you know, the Climate Vulnerable Forum countries have been making this commitment for a long time already. So I don't think that it needs every single country to be invited to give a speech. It's important that they all give their views on what needs to be, what needs to happen. But as far as emission reduction and reaching the global temperature goal, then major emitters are the ones that matter. And their emissions are what matters, not 200 countries,
not 40 countries. Okay, Sanjay, just to take it forward, I was kind of reminding of, though it's a bit of a distant and maybe you may say that it was a stretched way of imagination. I was thinking about that night in Copenhagen when US kind of brought a group of countries and tried to bulldoze their decision on the rest of the world. And we all saw on that evening, I was there actually sitting in I didn't go back to the hotel. I thought in my mind something historical is going to happen in front of me. So I was struck out there. So my question is that we all saw what happened in Copenhagen, how it fall flat. More important that how it actually pushed back the global negotiation to a number of years. So what do you think about it? Wouldn't it be kind of nicer if US could have called all of them, or making up kind of some kind of a inclusion procedure? I'm not saying requesting all leaders to be part of it, but some kind of an inclusion procedure. What's your take?
Well, if I recall right, then I think we all were in Copenhagen that night and very depressed with the outcome. Well, my view is, and actually, thanks, Jayanta, for asking this question, because we saw the criteria that US used to bring countries forward. I think they have used this criteria once again, this time, where almost 80% of global emissions are by these 17 to 20 countries. And even they also contribute almost 80% of GDP. So keeping that in mind, if US has been able to, in Copenhagen, Obama administration only bought those 20 countries. Now they are more sensitive. They have learned their lesson. They also realized that it's not only these 20 countries, it's also other countries who all play an important role. My opinion about only 40 countries and not all is maybe to infuse some confidence that we have to collectively decide and support the UNFCCC process, which is a legitimate process, rather than creating an alternative space for negotiation. That would be dangerous. That would again set back the climate talks. So certainly the main process of climate talks, where decisions are being taken by global community, is UNFCCC. And these kind of bilateral summits or multilateral with 40 countries should add to the momentum rather than challenge the authority. So that's what I strongly think. That
and don't feel that it's kind of trying to create a kind of a parallel to triple C movement.
Absolutely.
Because with US leading the show and the major economies out there, it can always be taken as a kind of a bit of a parallel to that.
Yeah. So, and if you remember, Jayanta, in Copenhagen, the Copenhagen COP collapsed because of that, because voting capacity of other countries was undermined by this 20 countries process, and that should not be done.
In fact, let me publicly say here, I had the chance of talking to Dasgupta, who was kind of China's envoy and part of that negotiation in Kolkata some time back. And he said that how Barack Obama, American president at that point of time, came into the room and just knocked him, because he was sitting, Chandrasekhar Dasgupta was sitting in India's negotiation chair, and he just came and just gave a tap and said, when he turned back, he saw that Obama was there. He said, guys, we have to do something about it. We have to find a solution. So that's the kind of thing US always pushed. So that's yes, definitely it's a very great move of Joe Biden, but these questions will be there. Great. Let's go to CB. CB, kind of deflecting from this question a bit. Let's talk about the India's position. John Kerry came to India, also to Bangladesh and Bhutan. And apparently there was no news in the mainstream media, no press releases, nothing. I actually did a story depending on 7 tweets. I had to dig out tweets, and based on the tweets, I did a story. And my story's main point was that India is not willing to shift this goalpost right now. India very clearly saying we are sticking to the Paris commitment and we'll be doing that, nothing more at this point of time. And subsequently, it was substantiated because the basic country meeting, there was a basic country meeting immediately after John Kerry came to India. And there, a formal kind of a notice where this same thing was reiterated. And then, the Indian Environment Minister had a press conference saying the same thing. So what's your take on that? This is a push and counter push between India and US. What do you feel about it?
So what you see is the reiteration of India's position for a long time, but I will say you will be in for surprise on 22nd of April. Okay. You heard from people, who have repeated the same issues over a long period of time, whether Mr. Javadekar, who has been Environment Minister for a long time, or the bureaucracy, or in the civil society, people who very strongly believe that what has happened in the past 30 years in terms of principle should continue for the next 30 years. I don't fall in that group now. Okay. I very strongly believe that what has failed for the past 30 years cannot succeed for the next 30 years. Okay. It's very clear. there is you use any benchmark to judge what has happened for the past 30 years in UNFCCC. And if you can say that something has worked, then I can support the idea that let's continue with this. I'm also responding to Sanjay's issues of keeping the negotiation at UNFCCC. Why? Okay. Just because we have done for 30 years at UNFCCC, does it mean that we should not look at other avenues? Okay. There are so many multilateral platforms to discuss this. UNFCCC cannot solve world's problem. Okay. At multiple platforms, if you really want to reach net zero, if you're really looking at 1.5, why should we be stuck at one platform? What is the argument other than the fact that we have negotiated for 30 years at UNFCCC? Okay, there are multiple. I strongly believe multilateralism should be the fulcrum of climate action, but that multilateralism can happen at tens of platforms that exist. Okay, we can create multiple multilateral regional platforms to address climate change. So I am not stuck with UNFCCC. UNFCCC processes are also toxic. Okay, if anyone says that it's a very camaraderie that is exhibited at UNFCCC, is wrong. That's a toxic process. We all have contributed to that. So I am coming back, Jayanta, with a very clear perspective. Now that in climate negotiations, you don't have to be sanctimonious. Okay, we have been sanctimonious for years now. Now look at practical answers, which is going to solve your problem. In case of India, we have air pollution, we have water pollution, we have GHG emission, we have degradation of forest and land, and many of them will have co-benefit of climate change. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now to say that you know what, I'm not going to do anything if someone else doesn't do. How does it help us?
Okay.
So India, I believe it is in India's interest that there is a global action on 1.5. It is in Bangladesh's interest that there is a global action on 1.5. Okay. We can either be bystanders or we can be the leaders. Okay. The choice is ours. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I believe that it is in India's interest to lead this argument, and I'll come back to it. There is need to frame net zero. Okay. Frame net zero in a way that it is useful for everyone.
So you feel that India should frame its net zero target and go by that?
It is part of Paris Agreement. Salim said that. Net zero has not dropped from some tree. It is part of Paris Agreement. Every country has to give a decarbonization strategy but what they are going to do in the middle of the next century. You know, net zero, in fact, I just want to tell you, because media is portraying as if net zero is something new. No, net zero is new for us because we have not discussed it. But net zero is part of the Paris Agreement. We have signed on to it.
Absolutely.
Okay, you can't be, we generally accuse developed countries by saying they are selective, but so are we. Okay, so I think, there is need for a little bit of honesty in the discussion on climate change.
Okay.
I feel we have lost that ability to be honest for a long time. It is important that we bring it back.
But Sibi, very quickly, what's your take on this push and counter push between US and India? John Kerry coming and kind of pushing India to commit something, either in this summit, this particular summit, or in Glasgow. And India countered by officially saying now that we are sticking. And, in Madrid, the Indian negotiators very clearly said, even we are not inclined to accept preponing the GST. Even they were not willing to take global stock take, preponing the global stock take. Sanjay knows it because we discussed there. So very quickly, your take on that, on India's position.
I don't have to respond to John Kerry. Why should we respond to John Kerry? We should come out with our own agenda, what we want to do. Why should I respond to anyone? Yeah, we are making it as if John Kerry US is pushing us. Okay, why should anyone push us? Okay, We are a proud nation, a big economy of 1.3 billion people with lots of problems. Okay?
Okay.
We don't, no one needs to set agenda for us.
Okay.
We need to set agenda for ourselves.
Got the point.
Yeah.
Got the point. Ranga, very interesting. You heard India's position, when I'll be coming to Sanjay to talk about India's position as well. But before that, to Sri Lanka's position, is that, see, the kind of a target like net zero, I think is not relevant. In India's case, it is realistic or not. In your case, it is relevant or not. So what's your take on this kind of target being set? How do you see that? And what's the Sri Lanka's official position on that as well?
Chandra, I will build on what Chandra just mentioned short while back. We have our own set of problems, and all these problems have direct or indirect links to climate change. So as a country, we need to set our own targets and our own pathways. So now we are talking about the less emitting countries might have less relevance towards net zero targets. But I think it's not. I think it's not. If Chandra correctly mentioned that the climate change negotiations is not just one track. It's coming with different pathways. Different things are convergent. I'll take an example. The recent EU Green Deal. If you take the recent EU Green Deal, now they're talking about putting a price on carbon and even coming up with border carbon adjustment mechanism on selected goods and services reaching to their border based on the emissions of the country. So I think the countries like Sri Lanka, countries who are not emitting so much, but they are connected to the world through the global trade and so many other pathways as well. I took trade as only one aspect. So if those countries are not rallying around this idea of net zero, they need to digest this. If we are not going ahead with our own pathways, what will happen is that equitable transition towards net zero in the global scenario, that most of the countries will fall behind. We might have a lot of trade implications and economic implications if the countries with less emissions are not going ahead with the targets. As Chandra correctly mentioned, we have agreed. Every country has agreed that we will go for net zero by mid-century. So the countries need to have it. So irrespective of your emission levels, I think as a climate change, the people who are advocating for climate action, I think we need to push each and every country to have their own net zero target.
Okay. Ranga, I think that even Sri Lanka, though yet to announce officially, is now working towards a net zero target.
I'm not quite sure about the Sri Lanka's position, but it's highly likely that position will go through. But of course, there are so many other things might also consider, especially about the post-COVID recession and stuff as well. But I think the net zero will coming up, because I have seen the lot of discussions are going on in terms of the trade aspects. From the private sector and even from the small and medium sector enterprises, that if we are not moving towards that, we will be very uncompetitive in the international markets, and so as in the other processes as well.
Okay, great. Salim Saab, I think first of all, Bangladesh position on that, the same thing, that I think the net zero doesn't kind of relevant in case of Bangladesh. And also, I really would like to kind of add on, I was looking at an ActionAid report some time back, which clearly shows that net zero is not the real zero. And also talking about that to do the net zero, the amount of plantation and other things you need to do have the land. So there are a lot of other factors. Just jumping on the net zero won't work. You have to also see how the whole package goes. So what's your take on that?
Thank you very much, Jayanta. I'll answer your question in a minute, but I do want to pick up on the discussion between Sanjay and CB, and give you my view on the COP and the UNFCCC process.
Absolutely.
As one of the very few people who have been to every single one of the 25 COPs under the UNFCCC, I used to believe a lot in the COPs, but I am now inclined to agree with CB. It's lost its ability and purpose. And I'll give you an example. The example is the fact that because of COVID-19, COP26 had to be postponed from November 2020 to now November 2021. And they're even discussing maybe another postponement because we all won't be able to go to Glasgow for it if it, in the old way. And so in this 1 year of postponement, climate change has not stopped. In fact, I would say climate change has crossed a threshold where we are now visibly in a climate changed world. The global temperature has gone up above 1 degree. We are seeing impacts. Just in May of last year, India and Bangladesh got hit by a super cyclone, Amphan. That became a super cyclone because the temperature in the Bay of Bengal was 2 degrees above normal. That is climate change. It's happening. We are suffering loss and damage from climate change. Postponing a COP is not going to postpone climate change. And so I am now inclined to agree with CB that we don't need these big meetings to agree on things. We've agreed already. We've agreed the Paris Agreement. We need to implement them. Let two countries come together. Japan and US just, the two leaders just met. Let them agree to implement it. Let India talk to Bangladesh and say, us two countries will implement it. Everybody needs to be talking about implementation every single day, not just for 2 weeks out of 52 weeks in the year. Okay, so to me, the COP is now almost redundant if we cannot keep the momentum going in getting things done, implementing them. So let me answer your question on net zero in the case of Bangladesh.
Sir, before you answer that, I just have a quick supplementary question on that. The COP has become a kind of redundant because of its structure or because of the minds of the countries. The countries, my experience is they're always pulling it back. So even if we turn from the multilateralism to kind of a bilateral and implementation we're talking about, the same people with the same mindset will operate. So unless the mindset of the country and their leaders change, whether we have a COP or we have something else, is going to be the same thing, isn't it?
You're quite right. I mean, as Chandra very correctly said, nothing is black and white. There are good things in the COP, there are bad things in the COP. But what I'm arguing is that the bad is now outweighing the good. Okay. And so, where there were good things, we had Kyoto, we had Paris, but Paris to me was the pinnacle. We got an agreement. Okay. COP26, Glasgow is not going to be a new agreement. It's just giving momentum to the agreement we did 6 years ago. Okay, and for 6 years, we haven't done anything. So we need to be pushing action, not just meeting to talk about doing action. That meeting to talk is no longer a relevant reason for 200 countries to come together. There are some good things that happen there. We all get to go there. We all get to meet each other. These are benefits. I enjoy that. One of the benefits of being there, but it's not essential. We can find other ways to meet. But can I answer the question on Bangladesh?
Sure. I'll come to Sanjay to respond to your point later. But first, Bangladesh.
So on Bangladesh, again, I agree with CB. It is a national issue. Okay, it is our responsibility to do the right thing for our own country. And as I said, collectively, the Climate Vulnerable Forum countries had already, long time ago, set 100% renewable energy. This is a goal by 2050 that they had set as a sort of a aspirational goal. In the case of Bangladesh, we are now looking at that very, very seriously, and we are preparing something called the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan. And to answer your question on the limits of solar energy because of the lack of land, we are looking at the Bay of Bengal for wind energy, and the possibilities of wind energy in the Bay of Bengal for both Bangladesh and India are phenomenal. If we can harness wind energy, which the new technology of wind turbines allows us to do in the next 10 years, then we will satisfy the needs of West Bengal and Bangladesh from wind energy in the Bay of Bengal. And that's something we are now looking at. So we need to look at what's best for us, not necessarily what's best for the world. And then if we can do something which is good for us and for the world, we will announce it, we will pronounce it, we will publicize it. But the reason we do it is because it's good for ourselves. So the reason should not be we're doing it for somebody else.
So you feel that this net zero is kind of a achievable target?
Absolutely. It'll be achieved. I have no doubt about it.
But don't you think that, say, India is talking about 2050, 2060, 2070, but don't we need smaller targets?
Let me tell you why I'm confident about meeting net zero sooner rather than later. The answer is that if you look at the fossil fuel economy, coal, petroleum, and natural gas, versus the renewable energy economy, wind, solar, and batteries. Okay, there's a three legs. Wind and solar are both intermittent, so you need batteries to give you a stable supply. The cost of wind and solar and batteries is going down like that. Every day it's going down. Saudi Arabia just had the lowest solar energy production in the whole world just yesterday. And tomorrow they'll be even lower. And day after tomorrow, even lower. On the other hand, coal is becoming more expensive. Petroleum is becoming more expensive. Even natural gas is becoming more expensive. So just on cost benefit market, exactly, the investors, they're not going to invest in fossil anymore. They're going to invest in where they're going to make money, and they're going to make money in renewables. And if incidentally, Joe Biden's infrastructure plan is about green jobs. He's selling it for green jobs that it's going to create, not for climate.
In fact, Joe Biden actually has been pushing it.
He doesn't mention climate. He says green jobs.
Okay, Joe Biden has been pushing it.
Precisely. And I think it's the right strategy, because that's where the future lies. And once we start moving in that direction, we'll find that it's much easier to move than we thought before. We thought it was hard, very difficult. Once we start moving, we'll say it's not that difficult. We can do it.
We can do that. Sanjay, just to take forward the discussion that we have, very fascinating. Also, the relevance of COP has been come under scanner. Not only during this discussion, but I have seen various experts are talking about it, whether we do need such a huge kind of on-your-face COP program, or do you need smaller ones? But COP also has its own advantages. Once you do something in COP, that being accepted all across the world. So what's your take on that? Do we need COP like a cricket, that we have to reinvent 50 overs cricket, T20 cricket just to save cricket? Do you need a kind of a restructuring of COP, something of that sort? Sanjay, what do you feel about it?
Jayanta, very good analogy. I think me and CB has been discussing it for last so many years about relevance of UNFCCC process and all that. Well, I have a different opinion about it. If I look at last so many years of UNFCCC process and how at the national level in many countries climate policies have emerged, that's the outcome of UNFCCC. Whenever we speak about adaptation or resilience, we normally speak about right kind of development that will bring in the co-benefit. Similarly, UNFCCC process has brought in a co-benefit, and co-benefit has been that India has National Action Plan on Climate Change, State Action Plan on Climate Change. We have missions. Unfortunately, our bureaucracy has been more reactive than proactive. Had they been more proactive, I think we didn't need UNFCCC. What other thing that UNFCCC has bought in, of course, not to a great deal, I'm not happy with it, is argument about equity and climate justice. And the fact that every country is involved in global climate policy making. It's not 20 countries and I don't think, Joe Biden or China would like to have a bilateral with, let's say, Papua New Guinea to talk about climate change. Those talks are more about, as Salim mentioned, about green jobs. I mean, basically the economy, trade, how they can, both countries can benefit with it. They are not about global commons. And UNFCCC process has been talking about global commons. Having said that, I do agree that now countries have learned how to maneuver around COP and not to do anything. So we have to certainly change the architecture. But UNFCCC has to be the space for climate talks to pursue climate agenda. Salim, you mentioned about that last 2 years, climate change has not stopped. I agree with you. But I think there has been a huge dent on climate solutions agenda. How much has been able to, there's no burden on countries to report back every 6 months. What did you do in last 6 months? I think that burden has certainly, well, they can say we are a sovereign country, we are a proud country, we can handle our problems. But I think let's agree that every 6 months countries come forward and try to bring something new, and that has driven the climate agenda forward. So that's my opinion on the UNFCCC.
Okay, let's take this opportunity to probe further. Don't you think if we take, yes, UNFCCC has its own importance, whether it has become redundant or still a relevant force, that's something to kind of discuss and deliberate, I think, in a much more detailed manner. But let's see if we all accept that the UNFCCC's movement has been rather slow. Let's put it, even if we put it kind of dialect, is rather slow. And we have all seen that how the first 7 days, nothing works by the bureaucrats. And the last 7 days, last couple of days, everybody jumping to it and extending it for 30 hours, 40 hours to get a solution. I never understood when you have 14 days, why can't you have your ministers before and actually do the solution part rather than bringing them the last 2-3 days?
We need T20.
But having said that, don't you think if we say an improved version of the UNFCCC movement, the more involvement of the civil society and the academician and the experts in a formal manner. I'm not talking about the informal manner that's happening, that you are part of an observatory meeting or something, not really that. A real voice, a legal, authorized voice in the negotiation. Do you think, does it improve the situation?
So as I said, UNFCCC process certainly needs reforms. I'm not saying that we should not. We don't need 2 weeks COPs or substance. No. I think, as you said, using analogy of cricket, yes, we need a shorter duration, but enough political pressure that you have to deliver in this rather than waste 10 days and then only, wake up in last 4 days or 5 days. So certainly, we need reforms. So one is UNFCCC process, other is COP as part of the process. UNFCCC process, certainly we need it. It is doing great work. It has pursued agenda to this extent. The fact that 2015 we all clapped for Paris Agreement, we feel proud to achieve Paris Agreement today. That's all delivered by COPs as well as UNFCCC process. But now, from now till 2030, I don't think we need 2 weeks of COPs. 2030, maybe next climate deal. Few years before that, maybe 2 weeks of COPs will be required to give enough negotiation time. Certainly, we need those kind of reforms. One needs to think about it.
I can't help but asking very quickly responses of all of you three. Let's start with Salim. So very quickly, that you think that reforms are required rather than completely kind of cutting it out. What's your take on that?
I absolutely agree. Reforms. And let me give you an example of reform. I don't know how much you have followed this, but the United Nations under the Secretary General is also holding a UN Food Systems Summit in later this year, before the COP. And they have adopted under the Secretary General a very different modality. It's not a negotiated document between countries, which is what we do in the COPs. They have identified 5 different action tracks and invited 5 independent individuals to lead these action tracks. And I have the privilege of leading action track number 5, which is on resilience, food system resilience, which includes under climate change. And our mandate is to talk to everybody. We regularly talk to governments. We have to listen to governments, but governments cannot tell us what to do. We also listen to civil society. We listen to farmers. We listen to fishers, to young people, to women, anybody. We're listening all the time. We are taking in ideas all the time. And then we, the 5 chairs, will put these together and we will put them to the UN Secretary General and say, this is what we think needs to be done. Now you convince the governments to endorse it or approve it. They can or they can't, it's up to them, but it's a new way of working. It's not negotiated text.
So that mechanism needs to be...
Precisely. It's answering your question of how can other voices play a part in the decision-making.
More inclusive, make it more inclusive.
Precisely.
Rather than few governmental negotiator taking the call.
Precisely.
So that might have improved the COP standing a bit.
I hope so. I have to deliver.
Sibi, you are still completely against COP, or you think COP with modification? Very quickly.
You're muted.
Okay.
Sibi.
There are a few points that I want to make here. Okay, I'm not saying that get rid of UNFCCC. I'm saying there is need for reform at UNFCCC, but I'm saying UNFCCC cannot be the only platform for action. Okay, we can create a partnership at UNIDO, for example. I'm just giving you some names. We'll have to find an institutional fit. But you can think about an industrial partnership at UNIDO, where countries can come together and discuss how to decarbonize the steel and cement sector. Okay. For example, countries are already discussing aviation. Okay, at ICAO. There is discussion on ships at IMO. So what I'm trying to say that in 30 years, we have made climate change a sole property of UNFCCC. Okay, the time has come to divest that property. Okay, and think about, because I always wonder, how can you solve a world's problem negotiated by generalists? Most of the negotiators have no idea about how economy works. Okay, most of them are diplomats. Okay, how do you solve world problem in 14 days negotiated by generalists about a text that countries go back and reject it? This is the history of 30 years of UNFCCC. So we have to find multiple platforms where realistic discussion, debate, and action can take place. So I think there is a value for UNFCCC in terms of taking stock of what is happening in the world, what action countries are doing, to look at the big picture. Those kind of things are fine at UNFCCC, but I don't think UNFCCC is now a platform for real action, implementation that Salim was talking about. We have to find different modalities.
So kind of a reform.
Yeah, UNFCCC reform and create multiple platforms to take action, implement. The last point I want to make is, the Westphalian model of sovereignty needs to be seriously discussed. Okay, one of the things that coronavirus has told us is that sovereignty can be used to basically, completely destroy the world. The Chinese response to coronavirus investigation is something that we should carefully watch. Okay. Now, it is important for the world to know what is the source of this virus, how to understand its origin, so that we can find out that it doesn't happen again. Okay. But China is using sovereignty, okay, as a tool to basically block this international investigation. Now, countries can do this. In an interconnected world, we are no more living in 18th century when it took 90 days for British ship to start from UK and reach Surat. Okay, it now takes 9 hours for a flight to do. So in an interconnected world, in an interconnected economy, I think we need to start discussing the nature of sovereignty in an interconnected world. That discussion is very, very important for global governance. That's another area of discussion.
Fine. We have just 10 minutes of time with us, but Ranga, very quickly take on this. In what format do you think that UNFCCC, what kind of reform, very quickly? And also, let's also start this expectation part that what's your expectation from the summit? What do you really expect from the summit? Any concrete expectation you do have as a country of Sri Lanka and in general, Ranga?
Yeah, I think if we talk about the UNFCCC process, there's a missing element in all the time. Missing element is that UNFCCC, the process is not the 2 weeks or 5 weeks in a year that you do negotiations. There is a lot more supporting processes need to happen back in the countries, back on the ground, and that analysis come together, and that should be implemented. Right, but what we have seen is the rest of the 320 days has been forgotten. The 40 days or so that we are meeting somewhere around the world, everybody coming and talking and negotiating is being highlighted, but the back end processes have been neglected, or it has not been brought to the limelight. I think that's the missing part. I think that's why we are talking. It's about that we need a reform. It's actually not needing a reform. course, it's a reform because we have not been practicing it. What we need to do is that we need to bring it forefront. I think we have moved forward because the Paris Agreement, being the national determined contributions as the building block, NDC itself provides a country to think about the national level homework to be done. So it's about the policy coherence, which has been missing in the entire course of the history. So the countries are now thinking about the national level policy coherence, bringing different sectors together, how to articulate and coming up with the process. So we need to do that. So we need a change.
Expectation, and now the expectation, we're just kind of have to work it out. What's the expectation from the summit, Ranga?
The expectation from the summit, of course, we again the expectations should be in line with Paris Agreement. We want to limit the global temperature rise well below 2 degrees and then preferably 1.5.
Okay.
So we need to move towards that. Everybody, every country, every leader, every organization need to move towards that. Expectation is that we have some sort of a positively contributing factor within the summit that we are going towards that.
Okay. Okay. Let's start with CV. CV, your expectation from the summit? Very quickly.
My expectation is that if US has called this meeting, US will also have to announce a significant ambition. Okay, the test of the success of summit will be US leadership. It wants to show leadership.
So you expect US to come up with some very concrete.
Then, from India's perspective, I think India should also announce a net zero target. I have very clearly said that the net zero has to be developed within a framework where it is self-differentiated, it is flexible. You don't need a hard net zero target. As Salim said, we might achieve it much quicker than what we are doing. So even if India announces 2060, for example, it should be that.
No, are you expecting some target to be set up by India during the summit, this summit?
I am saying India should announce a net zero target.
It should. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm saying India should announce a net zero target, but India should also clarify what net zero means. Okay.
Fine.
It should be built on short-term targets. NDCs are important. So 2030 target is going to be important. So I don't think there is any problem of announcing a net zero and not announcing an
understand.
NDC.
So India should be flexible about it. India should be flexible.
But the last point I want to make here is the net zero discussion must parallel with a just transition discussion.
Okay. Absolutely.
All
very important.
Countries are
important corollary. Very important corollary.
Are going to have transition issues. So I think both this discussion must happen, and so should adaptation. So I now see 3 pillars of just transition, net zero, and adaptation as three legs of the stool on which the work should happen.
Great. Salim Saab, what's your take on the expectation?
So I agree with Chandra on the expectation. If we see the summit as President Biden's efforts to reclaim leadership on climate change, as he has said that he wants to do, then taking action at home on their own targets is essential. Fulfilling their obligations for finance on...
is it private finance or public finance?
Public finance from the US government.
So you expect public finance to be announced?
Absolutely. Okay. The good news is, by the way, incidentally, when John Kerry was in Dhaka, he did say that they are going to replenish the shortfall that was made in the 2020 target when the US was supposed to pay $3 billion. They only paid $1 billion under Biden, and then Trump stopped the second two. Biden will provide that, and he will also add more for the 2021 target. So that is a promise that they have already publicly made. But I tell you, the one thing that is, to me, is still a niggling problem. And I had the opportunity to meet John Kerry when he was in Dhaka. Our foreign minister invited him to a lunch where I was invited. And I asked him about, what about financing loss and damage? Because while you have been away for the last 4 years, climate change is happening. It's causing loss and damage. This is not Paris anymore. This is not 2015. This is 2021. And people are losing their lives and their livelihoods and their homes and their places. What are you going to do to help them? And his answer was not very happy. He said, well, we'll fund adaptation and resilience. Funding for loss and damage will be difficult. So we have to push.
So this question comes back. There was a question mark. But is it a ploy to claim leadership, or is it?
Well, that's my.
Real?
that's my
perhaps
test
with
for
the Donald
leadership.
Trump
Exactly.
benchmark, perhaps with the benchmark of Donald Trump, we are trying to kind of believe everything he's talking about, or really hopeful that he will fill up that. But really, the reality may be different. But anyway, we can expect always that. Sanjay, your take on the expectation?
I would agree with all inputs that we have received on expectations. Yes, higher targets by US. They cannot claim leadership unless they
you're expecting
fair share.
This to come up from the US. We are almost in the fag end of the program. Let me end with a quick questionnaire. Just you have to respond. I'll be giving you three options. That is this summit going to be a game changer, changing goalpost, or geopolitics? Maybe a combination of any of two of them or whatever. So let's start with Sanjay. Sanjay, what's your take on that? It's game changer, changing goalpost, or geopolitics? Sanjay.
Geopolitics. Too early to say whether it's a game changer.
It's a geopolitics. Salim Saab, yours?
I would agree, geopolitics, but in a good way. He wants to become leader of the climate change world. Let him do that. Let him demonstrate it.
Okay. Let him demonstrate that he's the leader. Okay. Ranga, your take?
There's a geopolitics element of it, but I think it's also have a game-changing element as well. Compared to the last few years, it's going to change the game.
CV?
Yeah, I mean to say, I agree that it is geopolitics in good way. But one thing I'll tell you a quote of Mustafa Tolba. He used to be the head of UNEP. And Tolba always used to say that the global environmental governance is a canter. It is not a gallop. Okay, so this is what we have seen. So my sense is that this will set the stage for much more speed on action that we should see, because there's going to be a series of things before COP26 if it happens. But this will be the beginning of my hope of positive development and on climate.
So kind of a game changer in that case.
Not game changer. I said it is a canter. It cannot be a gallop.
It can't be a gallop. Okay. And this initiation of a game-changing process, if we put it in that way. I think it's a great discussion. And I think we kind of shifted from the men's thing and we talked about the UNFCCC, whether it has really become redundant, really a force to reckon with. Do we need, all of the very eminent panelists agreed that we need some kind of a deconstruction. I won't say deconstruction, rethinking about the UNFCCC process, making it more inclusive. It is inclusive in the CV's way of adding more multilateral structures into it, or linking to it, or the kind of more voices from the academics, from the researchers. But at the same time, I think most of you agreed that it's more of a geopolitics. And we all hope that this geopolitics will act in a positive manner vis-a-vis the global climate negotiation, and will actually contribute to the success of COP26 rather than dragging it back. The only kind of a concern is that US creating a parallel platform without linking it properly with the actual platform actually can play a spoil sport in future. So these are all in the expectation, in the thought process. We all have to kind of look very closely how it rolls out. So 22nd and 23rd, whether the way we look at it, a game changer or a geopolitics or a shifting goalpost, it is going to be a very, very important summit. And I don't think after Copenhagen, after Paris, we really had that level of summit. I can still remember when we went to Copenhagen to cover, CB was with us. And when we saw CB, you can remember in the metro rail, when we were all going, we see Copenhagen. So the Copenhagen was transformed to Copenhagen. So again, that hope coming back, and that hope went out with the window in Copenhagen. I can remember that in the next summit in Cancun, on the beautiful sea beaches, hope with a question mark came back. So we all expect that hope will be more stronger, and we all expect, because climate change is a real problem. I think Corona is affecting all of us, COVID is affecting all of us, but COVID can be a kind of a children play in comparison to climate change when it actually affects you in that level. We all saw what happened in Amphan. We all saw what happened in Nargis, Cedar North. So with that, we keep on watching. We'll keep on talking. Next week, perhaps we'll again talk about it. But for this time, we end here. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice talking to everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.